for the sake of anyone listening, we want to make very clear that this is bullshit, and it's only meant to be bullshit. Oh, yeah. And you shouldn't feel like bullshit for listening to it, but please don't feel like you're going to, don't feel like you're doing anything by listening to this besides, you know, enjoying yourself, hopefully, and maybe learning something about a very specific topic, but it's not like an action you're taking in the world.
Yeah.
Like, you know, is that a reasonable way to put it?
I think so.
Okay. It's like, yeah, because
yeah.
I don't know. So this is a separate topic, but like to the extent that I feel like it would be, well, I don't even feel like it suits what we're talking about today or like what wine we're drinking. But I don't know. I feel like it's so self-evident to me, and I feel like it should be to most people, but like the wine industry is just so deeply privileged. Like I think it should be, actually, you know what, this does seat to well with the topic, so please like derail me if you want to get into specifics about other stuff, but like
okay,
talking about sparkling wine, because we're talking about sparkling wine today. I'm drinking a sparkling Vouvray. I don't know what you have this time.
I have the Domaine Carneros.
Oh, right, nice. What is it, vintaged or?
Yeah. I don't think they do just like a non-vintage blend,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just Domaine Carneros by Taitinger. Ooh, Cork Taint. Maybe we can get a Taitinger, some sort of sponsorship by them.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I didn't know they had a project like that. Taitinger is fantastic. I don't know if you've ever had that, but ooh-wee.
Ooh-wee indeed. No, Domaine Carneros is so fucking good. It's one of my favorite domestic sparkling wines.
Well, it would make sense if it's if it's a Taittinger property.
It is. So
also
they would do a damn good job.
Okay, so this is what I wanted to kind of lead into because I'm on their website, and for anyone listening, just Google Domaine Carneros and then go to their website. Sparkling wine is such a good focal point for discussing like the privilege and class issue of wine.
Mm-hmm.
Like wine as a microeconomic model is such a good way of thinking, in my opinion, and like maybe, you know, there are probably good critiques to this, but I think that wine is a very effective model for looking at economic disparity and basically class, because it functions in a very particular way between labor and land. Like labor and property are very much at the core of how wine is produced, and then there's sort of even particularly in our modern moment, because you not only have a labor class who simply are paid wage on their work, but then you have the ownership class, who are the people that own the vineyards and own the brands, and then you have a sort of professional middle class kind of, or professional managerial class, which is sort of sales and salespeople, who are, at least in my understanding and my experience, consistently paid much better than laborers, be they field workers or cellar workers.
Right.
And then again, you have the owners who don't actually do any work, but either make money off of it or don't need to worry about making money off of it because they simply own it and are simply able to enjoy it. And that's the weird thing about, like, not to get a little too conspiracy theorist with it, but like someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who we can all agree was, you know, the best example of the worst kind of billionaire.
Right.
What work he actually did and how much money he actually had was never clear. And I want to shout them out because they're such a good podcast, but there's an episode of a podcast called TrueAnon where they interview a woman named Maria Farmer, who was one of his victims. And she talks about how she would never get paid. Like, she was the kind of Jeffrey Epstein's first victim in some weird ways, and Ghislaine Maxwell's. And a really surprising thing about the interview with her is that they hired her more or less to be his sort of like they kept trying to come up with jobs for her, but it was mostly just to keep her around because they wanted to sexually assault her and take advantage of. I don't want to speak too much into it because she does a very good job of telling her own story on the episode of that podcast, and I would highly encourage anyone listening to this to go listen to that. But the thing I found surprising was that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, his sort of girlfriendish person, co-conspirator in child sex trafficking, never paid Maria Farmer, even though they kept like trying to make it seem like they were giving her jobs. Like, they just barely ever paid her. And she was an artist, and they kept stealing her art and not buying her art from her. So even though he was a billionaire, he didn't really, like, have money he knew what to do with, even to the extent of just, you know, like, tricking someone into staying around. He couldn't kind of figure out how to, like, pay her enough to make her feel secure in the, I'm doing air quotes around this, job that she had. And that's, like, and I realize it's a bit overwrought, but, like, that is very much how many people in the wine industry sort of are with their ownership of brands, because they have so much money that they just own a winery in addition to whatever their other properties are. Then, and this is not true of, like, so much of the wine industry, but there are lots of really hardworking brands out there that are owned by the people who make the wine and all of that. But wine as a class signifier, I think, needs to be put in those terms, and people should feel comfortable opening themselves up to the conversation around wine, which is honest about its function in class terms. And sparkling wine specifically, because champagne has basically a $40 floor when it comes to buying it domestically, and goes up from there. And it doesn't suffer the same sort of price inflation that something like Domaine Romani Conti does, but there is a whole echelon of champagne that you will pay $400+ for current release. So so that's, I feel like I've done my rant about that stuff and hopefully made some sort of a point. So I'm going to stop talking for a second so you can get us back on track, my guy.
All right. Oh, no, it's a good tie-in. So actually, because a lot of the reasons, you know, champagne's delicious and it's special for a lot of different reasons. But one thing that is unfortunate that comes with it is, you know, that price floor that you're just talking about. But I mean, you like, sometimes you can find some, like, grower champagne. So some, all right, so we'll do a whole champagne episode another time, but grower champagne is where the whoever makes the wine also grows the grapes, which you're like, oh, doesn't that always happen? And you're like, not in champagne, because it's a lot of different
and not in a lot of the wine industry. So it's funny that the designation is made with champagne. That's I think it's a valuable thing.
Right. But I mean, it's I feel like it's more common for like negociants are more common in, or at least more well known in Champagne than in other places.
Oh, well, and their domination of the market is more explicit, and that's kind of part of why I feel like it's worth talking about, like, class when it comes to sparkling wine, because sparkling wine, in the same way that the wine industry can sort of be used as distillation or lens into macroeconomics, or a model for macroeconomics, sparkling wine, even within the wine industry, kind of does the same thing. Like, it distills it down even further in an interesting way. Yeah.
I mean, it's like the kind of like almost like to any person who's not a super whatever champagne nerd or something. It's like basically like any champagne you ever heard of is a negociant.
Fouquet, like Moet Chandon, Taittinger, Krug, Salon,
all those fuckers. Is Salon is Salon negociant? Yeah, they are, right?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah.
And negociants are something that I've always like. It's genuinely simpler than it always, like, it sounds very complicated, but it's basically that, like, it'd be like a cooperative if everyone, like, had ownership in it, but they don't.
Yep. Yeah, I can confirm. I just looked this up on a bottle of Salon, on 2002 especially. It's there's an MM on the back, which stands for Negociant Manipulant, which just means they're a full-on negociant. So they buy fruit that they do not grow.
Yeah. So I suppose
they do not own.
There's a separate class of negociants who own some of their vineyards.
Yeah. And I don't know whether or not, like, 51% of the fruit you have to grow. Like, I'm sure there are regulations on what is. Yeah. If you see RM, that means it's a grower champagne.
Yeah.
But NM, you'll see everywhere I'm going to go into a different episode, but everywhere on a bottle of champagne, there will be a 2-letter code followed by a bunch of numbers and shit. And that will tell you information about the producer, which is cool. It's cool because if you know to look for it, you're like, oh, you're in a wine shop and people aren't helpful, or you don't want to ask something, you're embarrassed or whatever. You just want to do your own thing. You can just look on a wine label and be like, oh, okay, cool, this is grower champagne. It's not necessarily, like, indicative of the quality, but you know, it's something cool to know. At least you know something about
Yeah.
the producer or whatever.
Well,
But
and that's just with champagne, right?
yeah, that's just with
Yeah.
sparkling. Oh yeah, so yeah, champagne is sparkling wine made in Champagne under a certain strict set of guidelines. A lot of people just assume like, no, like they use champagne and sparkling wine interchangeably.
Well, a lot of people
But yeah,
do.
no, Champagne is a place.
Yeah. And it's like back in the day, Pinot Noir made in California was just called Burgundy. That was what people put on the label.
Yeah.
Which I think we've mentioned before, but I don't know if it was on one of the lost episodes, so I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Naming Champagne is, I think, the region that was really behind the the enforcement of the EU appellation laws.
I think so.
And the naming laws, because, but I mean, it's up there as one of the best brands in the world, and like they had no control over it for a while. Because, I mean, Cook's says champagne. It says California champagne on it.
It does, yeah.
Because they were grandfathered in because they existed prior to all that stuff. Franzia still makes a Chablis.
I mean, you can still write that shit on there. It just can't be exported to the EU.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know why they would want to import that shit anyway. But yeah. So
a bunch of French people go, God, I wish we could buy
Oh.
Cook's.
They're like, God.
Pourquoi we cannot buy the Cook's? I can't afford Salon either. I would rather drink Cook's.
Oh man, I would love to just go to Paris and just talk like a fucking Jersey. Où est le Cooks? And they're just like, I'm sorry, get the fuck out of here. Like you're in France.
Où est le Franzia?
La Franzia.
Franzia?
I don't know. Man.
J'aime Yellowtail.
Où est le Gabagool?
I won the Gabagool.
Yeah.
That's like that episode of The Sopranos where they go to Italy is just so glorious.
Oh, dude, it's so good.
Yeah, Chris just spends the whole time doing heroin.
Dude. Yep.
Classic vacation vibes.
What did Paul eat? Commendatore? Is that what he kept saying?
Commendatore. Yeah. He's just like sitting at a cafe table and then some old Italian guy sitting in the next one. He says Commendatore. And then they just look at him like he's an insane American, which he is. And
yeah, it's great. It was a sad moment though. Anyway,
Paulie is
the
so bizarrely tragic.
He's a tragic figure.
He's so tragic.
Yeah,
in the least tragic way possible.
Yeah. Oh man. But anyway, so that price floor. Oh yeah. So typically, $40 below $40, you're not really gonna find a bottle of champagne. There are
very specific and worth knowing about exceptions to that, including the Kirkland signature champagne, which is $25 a bottle from Costco, and is $25.
Yeah.
And is real champagne. Like, it says champagne on it because it is real, I believe, Grand Cru champagne. I'm not kidding when I say it's an excellent bottle of wine. Like, yeah.
That's so good, man.
Yeah.
Fucking Costco's killing it. But
they are.
Yeah, man. So, and so that wine, and then there's some, like, there's a shop by me that they have a bunch of grower stuff. And for some reason, it's all like $30, $35, and it's crazy because it's delicious. And it's like, I don't know how the fuck you got this for this price, but I'm not upset about it.
Well, that's a more East Coast thing, because at least with, like, it's like how I can get a hold of some Italian wines, I think, cheaper than you can, because and this is a totally separate thing that we should go into on some episode, but a lot of wine markets in America, if you're buying import stuff, are 3-tiered systems of importer, distributor, retailer, at least. But then if you're on, like, the West Coast and you're buying a certain French producer from a certain importer, that's also going to go through some, like, other distribution chain, and there are price markups every time a bottle is moved.
Yep. Everybody wants their cut.
Yeah. Which then, in some cases, like depending on how those pricing things work, and brands understand this, like, they'll be selling stuff freight on board, which is half of the suggested retail price. So sometimes, depending on how savvy people are being, if you only have, like, 2 tiers, you might end up in a wine shop where something is cheaper than it would be from the cellar door of the place that made it, because...
Right. That's fucking nuts.
Yeah. No, it's funny when it happens, but it can happen, like... at your local supermarket.
Yeah.
So stuff like that can happen, and it's weird when it does, but you know.
Yeah.
But at least with at least as far as I'm aware on the West Coast, you know, grower champagne tends to be slightly more expensive because it's smaller production. So the limitation of supply and the limitation of how many brands are actually carried usually mean it is more in the like $50 range.
Yeah. But so because that price floor is there, you know, if you're not trying to spend fucking $50 or $60 on a bottle of champagne, like, I want something that's sparkling and delicious. Fortunately, there are a ton of different options. And there are great, you know, Cremant Alsace, Cremant Bourgogne, Cremant Bordeaux, Cremant fucking, there's a Jura, there's
Cremant de Loire.
Yeah.
Basically,
like
every region of France, every big region of France has some form of that, as far as I'm aware.
And then and then there's some that don't have that designation. Like there's one, like we talked about the Patrick Pues.
Yeah,
he makes a sparkling wine that's just fruit from Chablis. So it's sparkling Chablis. It's delicious.
Yeah,
it's so good. Yeah, and so there's a ton of different options. There's a lot of good domestic sparkling wine, and
I
like this one having that we talked about before. It's a project from like a champagne house came over and was like, oh yeah, there's definitely potential here to make this, and then they hopped on board and dumped a bunch of money in and stuff like that. And
other classic sorry, not I was gonna go into Italian, but just European sparkling wines that people tend to be aware of are Cava from Spain and Prosecco from Italy. Those are probably the most known, just like general designations. Prosecco, I believe, is a DOC at least.
Yeah, there's a DOCG for it.
Yeah, and then Cava, I think, is a little bit more broad.
Yeah, Cava refers more to it's a style rather than a region.
Yeah. So like a lot.
So you can have Cava made from anywhere in Spain. Almost.
Yeah. So French Cremants will, depending on how they're made, and the French are much more intense about all this stuff. But if a French Cremant is being made in the style of champagne, it'll say méthode traditionnelle on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of domestic sparkling wine will also say that if it is made in the style of champagne. I don't believe Prosecco, like they have their own style indications, but I'm not that familiar with them.
Yeah.
And then Cava, like you were saying, is its own thing.
Yeah. Prosecco, a lot of times they'll make the wine and then they just inject CO2 into it.
Yeah.
In tanks. And then they bottle it or whatever.
Which also is a growing trend in the U.S. With domestic sparkling. A lot of forced carb stuff, especially rosé.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's way cheaper to do that than fucking the traditional method. It's a labor-intensive pain in the ass, but it's sort of that like labor of love idea, and it also helps sell wine, and some would argue makes a much better product and whatever else.
Oh, the nature of effervescence in it. It's a funny thing. Like the nature of the effervescence in méthode traditionnelle is very particular, and there are different gradations to it. And if you do like WSET3, you'll learn about like all of the different grains of sparkle or effervescence that go into sparkling wine. CO2 forced carb stuff, in my experience, tends to be pretty grainy, like the big bubbles.
Pretty coarse.
Coarse, that's the word I was looking for. Doesn't mean it's bad, but another trick with forced carb that's tough is it's the acidity relationship in the wine to CO2, which will add perceived acidity. Like not all white wines can just have CO2 added to them and they'll taste like good sparkling wine. I've had forced carb. I actually had like forced like kind of hand done forced carb wines. That were really, really good because that particular wine just accepted CO2 really, really well. And I've had other ones that were like actually in a bottle that, you know, somebody had made and put under like a crown cap or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, you should have just done this as still wine and like maybe find it a little bit better or something. And like,
yeah.
People,
where they just soda streamed a bottle of wine.
I've literally done that. Yeah. And it's great. Like I've done that with a bottle of wine that it turned out fantastic.
Really?
Yeah, that 17 Pinot Gris that was in the tank when you were when you were here.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to force carb it all because we just soda streamed a bottle of it and it tasted amazing. It was
Really?
frighteningly good. Yeah, but we just didn't have the money at the time.
Funny.
Yeah.
Mm.
But literally in a soda stream. It was so
That's great.
Yeah. Which is not an endorsement of SodaStream. I want to make that clear.
No. I did it with one of my friends once, but we like he just had like a bottle of, like it was like Yellowtail or something.
Yeah.
That like someone had given him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, dude, I don't want to drink this. What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Do you want to soda stream it and see what happens?" They were
Nice.
like, "Yeah, maybe it'll make it good." And we did it, and it was fucking horrific.
Yeah.
It was so fucking bad, man.
No, yeah, we tried it with a couple different wines just as experiments, and they weren't nearly as good. It had very much to do with the acid already in that wine. Because another thing about sparkling wine, no matter where it's made, the entire flavor and acidity profile, and even the tannin profile, is wildly different from still wine. And learning how to drink and analyze sparkling wine is kind of a thing unto itself.
Yeah.
It's a there's a lot of subtlety to it because it all happens at a much leaner and more tense moment in the development of the fruit and the flavors in the fruit. Because again, I forget what we did talk about and what we haven't talked about. The fruit's just picked earlier. Like it's just picked at, usually 2 to 3 weeks before you're picking for still wine. So you're just going to end up with these wild acidities, wild malic acid, all kinds of stuff. And malic acid plays a huge role in like determining, I mean, from as far as I know, most method traditional goes through malolactic fermentation. And then if you're force carbing a wine that wasn't put through that, it's just going to be a completely different thing. And it's I don't know. It's such a mixed bag that it's really hard to say definitively anything about sparkling wine as an entire class of wine because it's just so broad. But at the same time, how it is perceived and what it's compared to is so narrow because it's all compared to champagne. Because champagne, again, one of the best brands ever at all, just as a concept.
Yeah. I would say it's even I would say it's way stronger than anything else. Like I would say people are much more comfortable with saying like, oh, this is a Pinot Noir, rather than saying like it's a Burgundy or something like that, than they are with saying like it's a sparkling wine versus it's champagne.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
No,
it's
just it's synonymous.
It's one of the most pervasive things in wine. Yeah. And it's one of the like it's a good example of exactly one of the key mistakes you should never make fun of someone for making.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like if someone's like, "Oh, this is lovely champagne," and it's sparkling wine from Tasmania, it's just it's much more it's much worse as a gaffe to be like, actually that's champagne than to than to say that by accident. I don't know. It's just one of those little I don't know.
No, totally. It was like when I was working at that wine shop, that was the thing. People would come in being like, "Oh, hey, yeah, like where's your champagne? Like, I want to buy a bottle of champagne." It's like, okay, and that's sort of the way that we would like work around it would be like, "Oh, like, are you looking for like sparkling wine specifically from Champagne, or are you okay? Like, would you be interested in sparkling wines from other places as well?"
Yeah,
rather than being like, actually,
actually,
being like a total piece of shit about it. Yeah.
Saying actually with a very long in it.
Yeah. You have to do it. If you're gonna do it, you gotta do it.
Oh, you gotta go full bore. So what you just said reminded me a thing that most Cremants, Cremant d'Alsace, Cremant de Bourgogne, or Vouvray. So there are places in France where if it's a sparkling wine, it won't be called a Cremant. There is Cremant de Loire, which is broad, but then there's specifically sparkling Vouvray, and there's also still Vouvray, and it's a whole complicated. There are rules around the laws. There are laws, and not just rules, around all of that and how stuff is named. As far as I'm aware, basically everything from France is going to bottom out at like $16 a bottle, at least around where I am. It's kind of hard to find. Like you can find a Cremant de Loire for about $17, $16. But then when you talk about like Prosecco or Cava, you can get down to like $9. Like sparkling wine does not have to be more expensive than still wine by any stretch of the imagination. Champagne is its own category and all of that. And then you get into the conversation around like minimum price for Premier Cru Burgundy or minimum price for white Burgundy versus whatever. But you can, if you just want sparkling wine for, you know, a French 75 cocktail or for a float or to make a kir out of, you can get Prosecco that'll function for that very, very well, because whatever it's lacking will be made up for the other part of the cocktail, by the other part of the cocktail, for less than $10, not without much trouble. Like,
oh, exactly. Yeah.
I'm encouraging people to not be afraid of cheap bottles of sparkling wine, because there are a lot of great ones out there. Like, I've had cavas that were, I think, $8 or $9 that were pretty good, like, just to drink, and then you know you use them for like a cocktail, and it's like, I wouldn't want to put, you know, this cocktail would maybe be exceptional if I were using Taittinger for it, but I would probably just rather drink the Taittinger and not put, you know, simple syrup in it to make
put something else in it.
To make a French 75. And I love that cocktail, so you know.
It's a good cocktail.
Yeah, it's good to know. It's good to have go-to $15 bottles of very clean sparkling white wine that you can make that out of. And I would encourage people to go explore that, because it's fun. It's just very fun. But and that kind of is the inverse of the whole class conversation. Is like getting out of that mindset of sparkling wine means champagne helps you open up your horizons with all of it, and you can suddenly start playing with stuff in a different way.
Totally, yeah. And I was going to add to that before, where like it doesn't have to be a special occasion to drink a bottle of sparkling wine.
No.
Like, so many people, I remember going into stores being like this is when I was just getting into wine and stuff, and being like, oh, like I wanted to get a bottle of sparkling wine because I'd heard about, like, oh, what's Blanc de Noir, you know? I was like, wow, sparkling, like all Pinot Noir, like how different is that going to be, you know? So it's like, yeah, so it was that one place in Berkeley. It's super good, and they had good shit that wasn't always like super expensive, you know, because they did have relationships. They were just a straight importer, so they could get
that's awesome
stuff for pretty reasonable prices. Yeah, so yeah, I was like, oh yeah, no, I want to get a bottle of champagne, and they were like, oh, like a special occasion, just like sort of, you know, chat, and I was like, no, and they were like, nice. And like like, yeah, because it is cool, because people, you know, a lot of people are like, people talk about champagne or something, and you're like, yeah, no, it's one of my favorite styles of wine, like sparkling, and they're like, people don't even think of champagne as wine; they just think of it as its own thing.
Yeah. Oh, you go say, I want a bottle of champagne. Someone's like, you christening a ship? Like, no, I'm no. I just I like LaCroix and I like wine, so I thought, why not combine the two?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just the best way to piss off a champagne producer, if anyone's wondering. And the other part of it is sparkling wine doesn't have to be white wine. Like the classic champagnes that everyone knows about, like Taittinger, Moet Chandon, Veuve Clicquot, they're all Blanc de Blanc, you know, white wine sparkling wines. But then there are so many sparkling rosés out there that are phenomenal. I know of a couple different, a Cremant de Jura and a Cremant de Loire that are both just magnificent. And they're rosés.
Oh yeah, they're rosés. Yeah. Oh man, dude, sparkling rosé is so fucking good.
Yeah, the only like super high dollar champagne I've ever gotten to try was a Krug rosé.
Oh man,
and dude, yeah, unreal.
Dude, Krug rosé is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it was an unreal bottle of wine. Yeah. I got just a tiny sip of it, and it was because a dear friend of mine saved me a tiny sip of it because it was a whole long story. But yeah, no, unbelievable wine, just completely unbelievable.
Yeah, oh man, that's a separate thing, but those wines are like I remember the two occasions. Like I was able to taste Krug, just the regular Brut, once, and was able to taste the rosé once. And I remember like everything about those moments. Yeah, and that tells you a lot about a fucking wine.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's the thing about
it's insane
expensive, and that's the thing about sparkling wine generally, but then especially expensive sparkling wine is it does stand out even amongst great wines because sparkling wine operates in a different realm, and its ability to occupy different sense memories, because it's a different smell and a different set of smells. It immediately is able to live in this other part of your in the musculature of your memory. I find just so. It's why people use it for celebrations, because it helps certify a celebration. And not that, again, I really agree with you. It doesn't need to. You don't need to be celebrating something, but it is a useful tool for celebrations. Like, it's almost a good tool for a celebration, because it helps hold on to other memories from whatever it was. Like, you remember other things that kind of just get wrapped up in the smells of a good bottle of sparkling wine. What was the thing that... but the thing about all that, you know, deserves to be treated honestly, and I say this sincerely, if you're out at dinner and, like, you can buy just a glass of Krug, it'll probably cost the same as, like, several other bottles on the list, but it's worth it.
Like, that would be wild if somebody just had Krug by the glass.
Yeah. No.
I'm sure there are places that do it.
I think there are, but, like, you know, and if you're there, you're probably not that worried about buying a bottle of Krug anyways. But
that's true, yeah. The kind of places that would sell Krug by the glass are the kind of places that, you know, that's an excellent point. People who are there would be like, let's just buy a bottle of Krug.
Yeah. But
I don't know, man.
I would say on the inverse of that, if you have some friends who are interested in, you know, wine and want to have, like, a tasting group thing or whatever, like, there are times where it's worth it to pool in and not, instead of everyone buying their own bottle, just buying a bottle of something exceptional
100%.
Like Krug or like the classic example of this that I remember from when I was a kid and my parents had a tasting group with some friends, like quite a few friends. They did Sauternes, and everyone got, you know, bottles of Sauterne. But the options that everyone talked about very seriously before that was, okay, do we all buy our own Sauterne to bring to this, or do we all just chip in and buy a bottle of Yquem?
Right.
And since then, my dad at least has had the chance to try Yquem. I've talked to a lot of people who've tried Yquem, and there is a reason certain champagne houses are so renowned, and there's a reason Yquem stands apart from the rest of Sauterne as a concept. And and, you know, it's one of those things that is worth doing, in my understanding. Like, I'm you know, I'm not saying I'm doing it right now or all the time, but, like,
right.
but you know, again, I think it's part of that, like, you know, going out and buying cheap bottles is bubbly because it's worth breaking down those, like, those concepts of class, or those, like, unspoken sort of, like, inhibitions around the value of a thing besides the thing itself. Like, it's good to go out and, you know, experience them for yourselves and and form your own opinions about it, because it might be exceptional and it might be really valuable, but, like, I don't know, it's one of the things I like about sparkling wine, because I'm much more of the opinion that, like, the expense of a bottle of Ceylon is much more legitimate than the expense of a bottle of Domaine Romanée-Conti or or maybe Gaia, you know, like, or Petrus. Petrus might be the best example.
Petrus is yeah, man. I mean, I was gonna say about Krug, it's like, it's legitimately, like, it's like $165 or $180 a bottle or something crazy. But, like, it's hard to, like, to somebody who's never had it or spent even, like, half that much on a bottle of wine, to say that it's worth it. It's like I don't know. It's hard to say that, because it would kind of be like, all right, get, like, 3 of your friends together and you all put in, like, $40. And, like, all right, that's a lot of money for, like, a glass and a half of wine, if that, you know. But just do it. Yeah. And see, and maybe you'll be like, oh, that was not worth it. Maybe you'll be like, holy fucking shit, you know?
And this is what I mean about, like, sparkling wine as a distillation of wine as a concept generally, and then wine as a distillation of, like, the market structure of our reality. Before doing that, like, the bottle I'm drinking was $20.
100%.
What I looked up, it looks like the bottle you're drinking was what, 35?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. The same's true with Pinot Noir, and, like, buy $20 bottles, or not, like, honestly, that's actually one of the great things about sparkling wine. You can get to know sparkling wine and have a great time with sparkling wine, spending $20, $35, you know, and there's diversity there. You can buy a lot of different bottles for between $20 and $35 and explore it, have fun with it, learn how to taste sparkling wine and how to think about sparkling wine. And then when you go buy a bottle of Krug, it'll be this amazing thing, and you'll set it in relationship to Proseccos and Cavas and all of these other things that you've had, and you'll be like, oh, this is why people care about champagne so much, and why it's not obscene that it has this reputation. And what's interesting to me is that Burgundy still kind of is hanging on to that, even though part of why I think it's losing that power is because there's so much Pinot Noir out there in the world from other places that are, you know, $40 or less, and they're exceptional. They're amazing bottles of wine.
Oh yeah.
And then you go and buy a bottle of Burgundy, and you're like, this is actually kind of weird to me because it's not like the other stuff I've been drinking, and I'm not sure I like it as much. And then you have another bottle of Burgundy that's maybe the same price. Maybe you paid $120 for both of them, and it's mind-bogglingly good, and you're like, oh, this is what that $25 bottle I had was going for and sort of emulating, or like what the mindset was the same, or the idea of Pinot Noir that both people had was the same. And you can there's a narrative there, but it's messier and it's more complicated and it's less distilled, whereas like I think there's a lot of the burden of proof is so high with champagne that the negociants that do define it for a lot of people have proven themselves pretty well over time. And I don't know of brands in Burgundy. Actually, that's not true. Like Jadot, Drouin, like there, Lafon. There are producers in Burgundy who have proven themselves and are sort of this benchmark. But yeah, it's a complicated thing, and I think that the payoff, sparkling wine is the one place in wine where like the payoff is such that I would like advocate people go and spend the money when they feel like they enjoy sparkling wine enough.
Yeah. It's I don't know. There's a lot of wines that I have never had and will never have the chance to have. From Bordeaux, from Burgundy, from Loire Valley, from all over. You know, Barbaresco, a ton of Italian wine. Yeah, like Spain. There's a ton of them, but like with regards to champagne, I mean, there's a bunch, but like a lot of like we said, the floor is pretty high, right? Like $40. But then there are, like let's say in Burgundy, you can spend, if you want to spend $15,000 for a single bottle of wine, you can do it. Yep. Same thing for Bordeaux.
You can do it for a few different wines.
Yeah, exactly. It's insane. And then for like current vintage wines, and for champagne, as far as I know, one of the most expensive bottles of champagne you can buy is Krug's, one of their single vineyard wines. And that's like $1,200 or something like that. But that's like in order of magnitude less than Burgundy. Yep. Which is crazy. Like, look, I'm not saying like go out and buy a bottle of Clos de Mesnil or Clos d'Ambonay or something like that. Or like, oh, it's totally affordable, you can do it, you know. But because those are probably wines I'll never get to try. But that would be insane if I could, and I'm sure they're absolutely fucking delicious. And who's to say what like $1,200 tastes like, or deserves to taste like, or whatever?
Don't say that, dude. Hey, in case this is a great moment for it. We have a Patreon. If you want to go, sign up for that.
Oh man!
When we get to where we can't just buy bags of chips from the gas station anymore, that's what we're gonna be using that money for.
Oh my god, dude! If we could somehow buy bottles of like Clos d'Ambonay or something, if we could get a bottle of Clos de Mesnil and Clos d'Ambonay, we're meeting together. We're gonna have those.
Yeah. Oh, no. And we're buying plane tickets and wine at that point.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. And that will be fucking
We're
wild.
saying this now. We want people to support us so that we can go drink these wines that are at these insane price points and then just basically say whether or not anyone should ever pay that for them.
Right, and give like an honest opinion.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of people... No, go ahead.
Oh, well, even at that, there are a bunch of wines that would be outside of like... There are a bunch of Burgundies that we'd never buy because it'd be like...
Right.
I don't know how much money we would have to be making on our Patreon to go buy, the current release of Domaine Romaniconti's Latache.
Right.
Like, it's insane how much some of those wines cost.
Yeah. No, it's wild.
I would go buy
like
a bunch of Rouleau, though.
Oh, dude, yeah, I'd buy Rouleau. Yeah. There's that place that we remember when we were there. We were at that wine shop, and in that case they had Rouleau. And it was like, I'm just curious, man, how much is this bottle of like Premier Cru Merceau? And he's like $450. Fuck.
But that bottle was, again, and it's I'm much harder on still wine for it. Like, that's one of the few that I would say, like, Rouleau's amazing. I've only ever tried it once.
That's because you've had it, though.
Yeah.
Like, I've never had it, so it's like,
I
it's
think
just
I had their
thing that I take your word for, which I do. Yeah, the regular Bourgogne Blanc or something.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're wait. So was it Merceau Volage?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think I have the picture of the bottle somewhere. It was. I think it might have just been their Bourgogne Blanc. Honestly.
Yeah.
It was.
But you said it was like insane, right?
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal. There was one other bottle of white wine I'd had that I liked more, but I couldn't say which one was better. Like they were both just
Right.
They rewrite your opinion of what or your concept of what white wine is. Even if you've had a bunch of white wines, they're just it's a different thing. It's like
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so good.
It's so nuts, man.
Yeah.
I remember there's this one. This is where I end up start talking about Burgundy and shit. But
I don't have that picture.
I don't know. I think I don't know. To me, sparkling wine like Prosecco, I've never had one where I've been like, oh wow. I've had one where I'm like, oh, this is pretty good for like the same thing as you. Like, oh, this is $9. This is pretty good.
Yeah.
But nothing where I've ever been like, holy shit. I've had a cava.
But...
Yeah. I've had a cava that was super cool. It was like this, it was like a rosé. It was more like a red wine even than a rosé, but it was super dark because it was made with like Mourvedre and Syrah, I think. And there was a bunch of
there is also just straight up sparkling red wine, which we don't.
Oh yeah,
I don't know really anything about, but it's out there. Just
like Lambrusco.
Yep. Exactly.
Lambrusco's so fucking good, dude.
Nice.
Oh, you give me some gabagool, some salami, some fucking any of that shit, and with some Lambrusco, get me some cheese as well. Oh, there's nothing better.
Nice.
It's so good. I mean, social justice is pretty good, but let me tell you.
Well, that was a statement.
That was a statement.
Yep.
We'll decide later. I'll mark down the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to. Yeah, I don't know where to go with that one.
But yeah, man. Fucking. But yeah, so Prosecco is like, nah. At least in my opinion, in terms of like.
Yeah, I've had Prosecco that I like a lot. Like just for pre-dinner sort of, aperitif stuff. But not like, moment defining.
Yeah, nothing that really you were like, oh, fuck, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's at least with me. And then Cava I've had some, and then a bunch of domestic sparkling wines I've had, like, moments where I'm like, oh, shit, this is really interesting. But then it's the kind of the same thing where, like, it comes back to, like, there's a reason it comes back to champagne, and for me it's the same reason with or it's the same thing with Chardonnay and Burgundy.
Yeah.
Like Pinot and Burgundy not as much.
Yeah.
I feel like because I've had a lot of Pinot Noirs from other places in the world where I'm like, wow, this is fucking amazing. Like reactions that I've had that have been much better than I have with a lot of red Burgundies that I've had.
Yeah.
But with white Burgundy though, like I've never felt a certain way about a domestic Chard as I had with a bottle of Merceau.
Yeah.
That I had, and it just blew me out of the fucking water. Like I've had a lot of New World Chards that I loved that were so good, but it's different,
No, and that's a thing that I think is very like hard to. I mean, people who've been listening to this, if there are any of those people, know that we love music metaphors. But it's like when you hand someone an expensive guitar, they're gonna play it and be like, "Oh, I just want to make music on this thing." Like it's so easy to make this sound good. Because it's a great guitar. Like you just feel like I think wine's kind of the same way. Where I almost like to get people into wine. You want to be like, no, you should like. You're gonna have a lot more success getting someone excited about wine and interested in continuing with wine if you pour them an amazing white Burgundy or a well-aged Nebbiolo or I don't like something that just really is right at the pinnacle of like what you want to, or a good Barbera, right? Barbera is probably the best one to start people on because it's not too expensive, but it is just so inviting. But you don't want to like start people off with like mediocrity and then expect them to like work through that up to a certain point. Like even though that's what you kind of have to do because you just have to wade through all the stuff that you can afford before you're really you're savvy enough to know how to spend that money. And Pinot Noir is so brutal because of that. There's so much that's like $50, that's fine, but you can buy way better Pinot Noirs for $30, but you might also for $30 accidentally buy something that is just dog shit.
Yeah.
And that's complicated. And sparkling wine I appreciate because you can buy some pretty trash shit for like $12, but you can also buy a lot of like pretty great stuff. But then when you get to champagne and you're spending $35, you'll buy something that you won't really like, but you won't buy anything just bad.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And after a certain point with champagne, you can only really have like
opinions. Like you have your own taste.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you can have like disappointments. It's like, oh, I spent $60 on this hoping it would be good as that $60 one I had the other day.
Yep.
When my whatever.
Well,
and
it's like one of the you asked me pretty early on when we knew each other what one of my favorite wines was, I think. Mm-hmm. And I said Veuve Clicquot.
Like that.
And I like Veuve Clicquot because it's consistent. It's not the same all the time, but it's there's an idea of what it is, and what it is quite good. And I have a lot of affection for it for very personal reasons. Like I grew up getting to go to and this might be giving away some stuff about my like personal history with wine, but like I got to grow up going to a New Year's party with David Lett, the founder of the Oregon Willamette Valley Pinot Noir industry, where everyone would walk up to the top of this hill and drink Veuve Clicquot. And it's like, of course I love that. Like it's and I love it because it still tastes the same, more or less.
Yeah.
It's still a well-made, meaningful product that is very close to it. It excites some of the same sense memory I have from when I was like 12 and I was getting to try sips of it.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
That's an insanely special thing.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Some sparkling wines can do that, and there are sparkling wines that like you'll be able to buy for $20 that will be consistent. Like the Vouvray I'm drinking, I have so many good memories with this wine, and they're $20 good memories. They're like consistent, you know, like they're just parties that happened where someone wanted to bring a bottle of sparkling wine, and we all remember that as a fun evening. And it's like, what were we drinking? Of course, we were drinking the Fouquet, the Bernard Fouquets.
Right.
That sparkling Vouvray kicks ass.
Yeah.
But I have like very special and not as many great memories of Veuve Clicquot. I have one memory exactly of Tattinger, and it's a great memory. I have one memory exactly of Krug. And in my lifetime, that's the other thing. Is like, if we ever get enough money, we won't buy Krug all the time and just drink it. We'll talk about it a couple times, but like it'll be about the occasion of like doing that. But that's you don't want those wines to be cheap because you want them to be for special moments when they're that good.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that relationship I don't think exists with like Pinot Noir. I want Pinot Noir to be good for different reasons and in different ways, I suppose. Like every vintage is going to be subtly different in ways that matter, and I want that, and I want different places to. I don't know. I'm losing my like point, but you know.
No. I get what you're saying, and I don't know. I think it's one of the things I like about wine is that it can be so fascinating for so many different reasons and be so touching for so many different reasons. And just you telling me that story about the Veuve Clicquot made me think about is like so many. Like I wasn't even honestly, I didn't hear half of what you said. I was really trying to pay attention to, but just you saying that like made me think about so many different times I had wine that I was reflecting on with other people where in that moment I was like, wow, this is something that's really special, and in doing so this moment is really special. Like I remember this past Thanksgiving, it was a nightmare. I was miserable, you know, and I hated it, and it was way too much going on, and I was very stressed out. But I had this bottle of Chablis that I sort of had, right? It was my thing I set aside where I was like, all right, this is going to help me get through this. Also a bottle of wine from a particular producer in Oregon that I'm a little partial to for a couple of reasons. But in fact, one particular bottling of that happens to be one of my favorites. Anyway, but I had this bottle of Chablis and opened it up as kind of like that, man, at least I have this. And I had never had it before, and I did not expect it to be that good. Yeah. Like, it's not like I was like, whatever, I wasn't expecting it to be bad. I just was like, oh, I'm curious about this, haven't had this. One of my friends told me it was good, and I had it, and I was like, holy shit, like, it really blew me away. And then it became the kind of thing where I was like, all right, I have this, and then it's like one or two people who I was like, all right, yeah, no, I want you to taste this, and so they would come over, and we try to be all like, we try to be secretive about it,
Yeah.
and I would give you a little splash, give you a little splash, and then it became like that was like our thing at that moment, you know,
Yeah.
where like we had this secret thing that nobody else knew about, and we were just sharing that, and yeah, I was very unhappy, and it was like dog shit, but I fondly remember that one aspect of that Thanksgiving, and if you ask me what else happened that Thanksgiving, I know other things happened, but honestly, they all happened within the sort of framework of a couple different wines that I had had.
Yeah.
And so that's like, it's hard because at this point in my life, I'm way too deep into this shit, but like, wine is such a special thing for so many reasons that it's hard to articulate exactly why I like it. Like if someone's like, oh, like why are you into it? It's so difficult to articulate that because it's become integrated into just like not my identity, but how I sort of perceive and understand like my surroundings in this sort of like subtle, pervasive kind of way.
No, and I think that actually relates to why, you know, in these conversations, I like using music as an example, as an analogy, because in the same way, there's a different sensory place that you capture memory with wine that other things can't do. Like it's completely unto itself. It's why synesthesia, as it relates to wine and music and other stuff, is something that I think people need to be very careful with. And I respect it, but I want it to be taken very, very seriously, because the relationship of sensory experience to memory is a deeply complicated. It's why literature exists. I mean, like that's like the whole start of like In Search of Lost Time is, you know, related to is related to a Madeleine, like to a cookie, like the nature of. I mean, that's the thing about like sparkling wine, and people know that about sparkling wine. Sparkling wine is used for that consistently. It, like culturally, it's understood to be for special occasions, for weddings, and for, you know, for graduations, for promotions, all stuff like that. And then when you get into still wine and the world that like the world of the world, like it's why that idea of relating wine to the structure of capitalism that we have now, or like the structure of economics we have now, is important to me personally, because wine culturally used to be a completely different thing. You had what you had that was local. You had what you had that you made, or like your neighbor made, because you gave them cheese and they gave you wine or whatever. Like,
right.
Wine is a special form of alcohol because of its, like, there isn't a direct line, even with something like whiskey that can age for a long time, between what you understand of the bread of a season and what you taste in the whiskey of that year, right? Like you don't...
Right.
That doesn't work. But the flavor of berries from a certain year where the berries were really good can be held by wine. And the value of that is something that I think people really... Like, there's some sort of quality to the fact that wine is grown in regions that, you know, sort of articulate the boundaries of where it's really easy for, not easy, but like where people live more comfortably. Like the places in the world that wine is grown are sort of on the like periphery of the like major population centers of the world, right? I don't know if that's exactly, like the tropics, the edges of the tropics, right? Like North and South Africa on the south, and like Argentina. I don't know. That's an idea that I think it would be worth studying and drawing some comparison to, but I'm just making it up right now. But like wine is about the margins of where like life can happen, and then the value of that window where it's not, you know, where experiences really happen. Like what you like the story that you were telling was like, it's a real experience, and wine is something that can hold on to that. And it's tricky these days because wine is so pervasive. There's so much of it. You can buy it from all over the world now. And it's important to put that into perspective historically, I think, and to acknowledge how recent a phenomenon that is, and how recent a phenomenon is that you can buy sparkling wine. How recent a phenomenon sparkling wine is generally. It's not a very old product. It doesn't go back as far as like Pinot Noir or you know or I'm trying to think of like the real old school stuff, but like like people can still get wine from Georgia that goes back who knows how many thousands of years, the varietal. But yeah, like that relationship between experience and sensory touchstone for experience is one that is very, it's something that deserves to be thought about, and something that deserves to be I want to say sanctified. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's the word that comes to mind. Actually, so looping back in, that's part of why champagne as this class signifier is interesting to me, because champagne can't have the meaning it should if you have enough money to just be buying it all the time and drinking Krug every night. Like if you drink Krug every night, it stops meaning what it should, and it stops being this magical artifact, not just of culture, but of like agriculture and of food craft that it should be. Of food craft, Krug is this, master spell of memory. Like it's this amazing piece of magicianship almost that people should think of in that way. And if you just have enough money to buy it whenever you want, you have no respect for that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I appreciate that I can buy a bottle of the Fouquet anytime I want for $20, but I don't, because I want to have it on those nights. Like it doesn't need to be an exceptionally special night, but just a night that I know I'm going to be like, talking with friends, and I want to be able to slide up into the evening of wine with a sparkling wine, and it's going to be one that, it's going to put that evening in a certain category of evenings, like in the filing cabinet of memory there's a certain manila envelope marked Vouvray, sparkling Vouvray, and in that there's a subcategory that's the Fouquet, and there are all these great Polaroids from evenings in my life that I value really, really deeply. I'm gonna make sure to grab that folder before I grab the folder full of what would it be? I'm trying to think of what varietal I want to shit on right now that I don't really care about my memories with. But that's the thing, is like hazy IPAs, not even a wine. Just
Perfect.
Something like that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Sparkling wine. Like this conversation went a different way than I expected it to, but like we're not. I don't know what my expectations were, but like sparkling wine as a concept, I think is one that people should be more comfortable like owning in their own way, and and using for the sake of their own memory or experiences, and not one that is, put on some pedestal that, like you can develop a relationship with it before using expensive bottles of champagne for special evenings, and like, you can have a whole